a lot of us have multiple traumas that shape our trauma narrative.
No more hangers!
I think what makes it traumatic is if you feel like you're either, especially acute trauma, is when you feel like your life is at danger. A lot of times as children, Amani, we know what's wrong, but we don't know to the extent. And it does start to play out in other areas of our lives. I talk to a lot of my clients who have, been living with trauma, and they don't even realize that they were traumatized.
This is Seeds of Awakening, your home for higher frequency conversations. I'm your host, Amani Channel. Today we're going to talk all about healing, trauma, and things you may not even know that are holding you back in life. I have a great guest. We're going to have a great conversation. I'm going to bring her in just a second, but first, make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, smash that like. Did you know that the best way you can support this channel is just by hitting the like button? And it's free, so go ahead and do that now. All right, so why should you think about healing, or why do you need to heal? Why do we all have maybe injuries or traumas from the past that we need to heal? I'm going to bring in our guest right now. Her name is Menyuan Jordan, who's in the business of healing, and she'll explain how she can help you and help others heal their traumas from their youth or from their past.
Hi, Amani. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. So let's get into your business. How do you help people heal? How long have you been doing it and that sort of thing?
Well, the name of my business is Olive Tree Therapy and Wellness. And what we do is we help people heal and grow. We heal from the root all the way down to the head and through the environment. And how we do that is through therapy. I provide all types of clinical therapy. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, as well as other functional medicine that we use to help people heal. We use herbs, we use detox methods. In addition to that, in my sessions will have sound bowls. In addition to that, we'll do different movements. So we believe that you got to heal the body and mind, as well as your soul.
Like more of a holistic approach to healing people?
Definitely a holistic approach. We're bringing in other services such as massage therapy. Again, our body holds trauma. I in particularly focus on trauma healing. And so I think a lot of our mental health diagnoses are rooted in trauma. And so I believe, again, going back to the tree metaphor, we have to heal from the roots all the way through the trunk, through its branches and leaves, so we can be a whole, holistic person.
So what got you interested in the healing business as a business? What got you interested in doing that?
Well, it was interesting. My great grandmother Ella May, as a kid, she said, "Baby, you got some healing hands." I've always liked to listen to people's problems. I was always into people's business growing up. I was that person in class that got D's in conduct, needs improvement, because I genuinely cared. I was curious about what people were going through, and always had a spirit to help them. And so as I, went through life, my mom actually became a therapist and worked in the field. And I said, I'm interested in that as well. So then I started there, worked at the VA, and started working with veterans who had been traumatized during different wars: Vietnam War, Korean conflict, and of course the Iraq War in the Middle East. And so working with them, working as a group therapist, I really saw the hurt and pain. And I felt like I truly, like many other healers here, wanted to work on the ground level to help them heal in various methods. In addition to that, I have my own trauma story. So I have had various trauma experiences growing up. And so when you've been a victim as well as a survivor, it just resonates with you on that trauma story, and ways to be, I guess, vigilant about your own health and sharing that same space with others.
So it sounds like you have healing in your lineage, and then you experienced your own traumas, and then you got focused on helping others heal as well. So do you mind talking about what you went through personally?
Oh, wow. So yeah, so I went through a lot. I mean, I'm a sexual abuse survivor. At 4 years old, I was touched inappropriately, and I didn't tell anyone in my family until I was like 18 years old. And so I lived with that shame and guilt. about that experiences as a child. And I think a lot of times as children, Amani, we know it's wrong, but we don't know to the extent. And it
Hmm.
does start to play out in other areas of our lives. So, and like I also dealt with physical abuse in a previous marriage. And there's complex trauma, developmental trauma. My biological father, never wanted to know me, even to this day. He worked at a college here in Georgia, and to me, interestingly enough, the complex trauma, what we call developmental trauma, that constant, hey, that part that's emotional, sometimes is more difficult than what we see physically, than a bomb blowing up, because it's an injury that hurts at the developmental level, so it really shapes how you see the world. And so yeah, there's many different, a lot of us have multiple traumas that shape our trauma narrative. And so when we put that together, we have different layers of necessary healing.
Do you feel like you had to heal yourself first before you started helping others deal with their issues?
Nope. I think healing, there's never, that's an easy question. Nope. I think you have to be in a space that's healthy. That's different. I don't think you ever arrive. What you do is you have more space to hold the hurt. You have more space to hold the pain, to be able to, we call a window of tolerance, where your window of when you're triggered, or when you have those different like I said, trauma triggers resurface, then you're able to recognize it quicker, and you're able to use the strategies to help you to live with it. But never goes away. I think that's something that's an everyday, healing is an everyday process.
Hmm. So let's take it back to your youth. How were you raised? Were you raised in a spiritual household, more religiously? What was kind of your background? What's your foundation?
I definitely have a foundation of love for God. When you think about a religious foundation, I would say that I always tell people, I describe myself as being a mutt uh, in relationship to church and different backgrounds in that area. I am labeled a self-proclaimed CME, Christmas, Mother's Day, and Easter attender growing up. But I love church. I remember my mom always allowed me to go to church with my friends. I mean, I had a friend that went to a holiness church. I went to I went to Catholic school. So during the summer, I went to a Baptist church with my grandmother in Alabama, Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. And then during the school year, I was at Sacred Heart Catholic, cathedral, where I attended mass. So I felt like, I asked to be baptized. I loved going to vacation Bible school, hopping and just learning about the word of God. That's something that's been intrinsically instilled in me through my own just inner love for the word of God and for God. So I've always had a relationship since I was a young girl with God.
How did that relationship get affected by the trauma that you experienced? Did you kind of go through a point where you were like, God, why'd you let this happen to me? Or how'd you sort of manage that whole situation?
I think from the father lens, it helped me to feel loved and whole. I use my spiritual connection with God, because I would say Abba Father, like God, in the Word of God, it says, "When your mother and father forsake you, I'll be there." So it wasn't about sin. I understood that early on. Sin is sin. Sin came in this world, and that's something I can't control. But what I can control is connecting to a father that I know that gives me unconditional love, and so that's, for me, was uh, a protective factor to help me to push through this life. I would go to, I didn't have an earthly father. I had an earthly father, don't get me wrong. I had a great stepdad that raised me, who adopted me, who loved me, but he had his own demons, had struggled with alcoholism. He's still struggling with alcoholism. So it doesn't make him a bad person, but maybe not the best role model for long-term fatherhood. So you know what, again, our human parents, I'm imperfect, a lot of us are imperfect parents, but what I did have was a perfect father that I could go to, and to receive that type of love and covering when I felt insecure, when I felt scared, when I felt that I needed that nurturing.
Gotcha. So you just took the perspective that God is your eternal father and didn't really replace your physical father, but that was somebody you could turn to in times of crisis or challenges or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's everything. I don't know if it's like a earth is he's dad, He's the creator. He's
Hmm.
everyone's, I mean, ultimate father. So for me, I mean, it was like such a real relationship where I literally, I did a prayer journal and I would pray, I thank God for everything. I'll pray, I ask him questions like, why did you, I had a grandfather that was very instrumental in my rearing, and he died in 1997 when I was a senior in high school. And I just like, why would you take the only guy who really, really loved me away from me? Like, I don't understand. So yeah, I questioned him. I said, hey, what's up? We had that dialogue and we still have that dialogue. So, you know, I think that when you have something that's so tangible, that's always accessible, he's never busy. He doesn't have to say, hey, I'm at work right now, don't talk to me, because he's omniscient, he's omnipresent. And so he can be everywhere at one time. So this whole notion of a father for everybody is, to me, very healthy.
So I heard you when you mentioned some of the services you provide. You said singing bowls, some things sound a little more spiritual. How did you incorporate maybe non-religious or more spiritual aspects in your business? And when did you sort of expand beyond the Bible or expand beyond what Christians traditionally believe in your practice?
It's interesting because, I mean, if you go to the Catholic Church, you'll hear the bell ringing, ding, 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 ding. They use humming, I am the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Like, they do the same thing. It's just in a different way.
Hmm.
So I don't think it's anything any different. It's just a different instrument, but we still hear dings and bells and, the tambourines. We've always used instruments to praise God. So to have a different experience, but I also brought in the science. The science is that the vibrations from instruments like singing bowls, like tuning forks, like drums, anything, even the tambourines, just even your hands tapping your body helps to
Hmm.
regulate your nervous system. So it's not just a religious aspect. It's because I don't look at it like religious spaces to use a singing bowl. It's an instrument that has vibrations that helps us to attune to our bodies and to regulate our nervous system. So, but I do talk to people a lot and say, hey, in church we use incense. I mean, it's right
Hmm.
there when baby Jesus was born, incense and myrrh, right? Frankincense and myrrh. So this is nothing new. This is nothing new under the sun. We've been doing this for a long time, and we've also done it in traditional spaces in religious spaces as well. That we just don't look at it from that lens. But when we start clapping and we start raising our hands and opening up our prostrating our body in a way that's vulnerable and praying and I remember growing up again, going to the Baptist church in summer times, and they would have this intercessory prayer before the main church service started. And they'll be humming and praising and on their knees and doing it. The prayer was in a way very much meditative. So again, those principles to me cross religions, and it's just the human nature of how we heal.
Is meditation and stonework also a part of your practice?
You said meditation and what?
And stonework, like working with crystals and stones and that sort of thing?
Um, I have crystals, but it's not part of my practice.
Okay.
But meditation is encouraged. We definitely do visualization. Again, when you focus your mind, even I do use the word of God. Like, if my client has that belief system, I will use what spirituality is very much a good tool to use in therapeutic practices. So if my client endorses being a Christian, or uses the Bible as a tool, I use that tool with them. So for example, we may do a meditation where I will breathe in, be still, and know. So you'll breathe in, be still, and know, and then we'll breathe out that I am God. And so
Hmm.
we'll use those different principles and strategies from a scriptural perspective, but also just in general, where we'll use visualizations and breath work again, because not only is it people use it in the spiritual realm, but it's scientifically proven for your body. Again, if trauma lives in our body and we constrict and we're tense and we're frustrated, those muscles and our bodies is constricted, and all that space is being held and restricted. And so we have to relax it. You have to have a space for release. And so some of the strategies to help with that is to breathe and to meditate and to hum. I will hum an old church song though, because that resonates with me. But
Mhm.
I have them choose, what resonates with you, what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel centered. And so, but there are other letters that we use from the Eastern world that can activate different parts of your chest and your body, like a or a ha or a he. And so we do go to that level of connectivity as well. But I don't look at it as a spiritual space. I look at it as a strategic tool to help you to
Gotcha.
relieve some of that tension.
That makes sense. Yeah, I was talking to a person recently, and they were saying that like how meditation is sort of viewed as demonic within some Christian spheres, and how they feel like it can connect with different negative spirits. But I don't feel that way. I don't believe that at all. But I was wondering how that sort of integrated with your practice and how you sort of balance that out. But that answered the question definitely.
Thank you. Thank you. And then I just, if they feel uncomfortable, I'm like, well, we can use a different word of semantics. We can just say
Mhm.
prayer. We can just say
Mhm.
focus. We can just say, it says in the Bible to, write your vision and make it plain. That's you putting your intention out there. So there's, in the Bible it talks about the power, there's the power of life and death in your tongue. So we're speaking life. And so those are affirmations. I actually pull up biblical affirmations for my clients who endorse that world. Um, Again, I believe in meeting the client where they're at and endorsing and supporting them in spaces that feel comfortable for them. Because again, one thing about your therapeutic space, it has to feel safe. And for it to feel safe, you can't have someone pushing their agenda on you.
Right.
So if they feel like the word meditation, yes, I'm going to do some education around it, but I'm not going to I'm not going to worry about it. I'm like, well, what word would you prefer to help you to focus and to feel more calm in your body? It's that
Mhm.
simple.
Do you serve a certain type of client, like females, or just who do you serve basically? Who do you work with?
I do prefer females. We have a male therapist here. I feel called to work with females. I do have one or two male therapists, but I mean, sorry, male clients, but I feel called to work with female clients. I primarily work with older female clients, but I do see younger women as well. But what I'm gearing more to or leaning more towards is working with clients who struggle with intergenerational trauma, who have had different types of trauma, working around being adopted or attachment issues, again because of my own trauma. That's something that resonates with me. And so I've done a lot of work around what are we carrying ancestrally, in our
Mhm.
bodies. In the Bible, some people talk about generational curses. Here we talk about epigenetics, where your now it's been shown in some studies that your past traumatic experiences from your ancestors can be transmitted through your DNA.
Right.
And so not only is it environmental, but it also can be genetically passed down. So well, so I work with them on recognizing that and going through the tree and saying, well, what happened to grandmama now? What happened to my aunt? What happened? What was their experiences? And how can we create space for just, putting white light and healing towards them and their experiencing and giving voice to what they also endured. So
I feel like everyone has a measure of trauma they can heal. Is that inherent in being a human being on Earth right now?
So let me tell you what makes something traumatic. I mean, yes, we all have experiences that are tough, right? I think what makes it traumatic is if you feel like you're either, especially acute trauma, is when you feel like your life is at danger. If your life is, in a way, or secondary trauma where some like your say your grandmother almost died. I have a lot of clients who not a lot, but some clients whose parents were murdered, or their parents were victimized in some way. They didn't even have to see it, the victimization, but they were able to embody that pain and embody that experience to be fearful. It changes the way we see the world. So basically, you're typically trauma impacts people differently. You can have the same event. I'll give you an example. My brothers and I, my parents, we were in a tornado when I was like in middle school, 8th grade, something like that. But one of my brothers was like maybe 3, and my other brother was, in elementary school. Well, and then I had my parents, my dad and my mom. We all was in the same traumatic event, a tornado, right? That could kill us, that could cause us not to, be safe. Well, we all heard the train, and next thing you know, we heard the roof come off. The trees came through our home, and I was fine. I was like, but I mean, I don't want to say I was fine. That particular event impacted us all differently. So we all have a different trauma experience. We might have the same traumatic event, but the way that we experience it, the way that we heal from that, the way that we see the world from that experience is different. Me, I'm just very cautious. If I hear the alarm, I'm in the closet. I got my safety bag. I take it seriously, right? Because I've been in one. My other brother, it's interesting. My youngest brother, he was younger. He actually scared of the wind. He runs. When we were kids. It was like a whirling wind. He literally would jet and start running. We used to laugh. I was like, "Oh, Travis scared of the wind." But then I thought about it as from a therapeutic lens. As I got older, I was like, "Oh, you know what? That's probably when he heard the wind and stuff from when we had
Hmm.
that tornado when he was a little kid. That's probably why he's scared of the wind." You
Right.
know. So it helps to explain how we sometimes interact with the world. So yes, to answer your question, some of us probably, have different measures of trauma, but our trauma experience and how how it impacts us day to day is what makes you either be traumatized or not. It's how you deal with the trauma and how you live with it is what makes it difficult or not.
Let me ask you this. You feel like it can be religious trauma because, as you know, I'm a former Jehovah's Witness. I've kind of been scanning the YouTubes and the different channels. There's a big growing community about ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who feel like they've been deceived by the organization, or there's something wrong, or there's been some sort of wrong that they've been committed, or this a cult. How do you feel that can that be trauma as well? Can there be religious trauma?
Yeah, there's all types of trauma, especially what we call complex trauma, where you feel emotionally, abused. In many church spaces, there's a lot of shame and guilt and misuse of power over
Mhm.
individuals. And so, absolutely, that could be traumatizing from a developmental space. I think when you feel like you're in a space of control, or you feel like even some people where their control is exercised enough to where I had a client that was in Scientology, and we talked about what makes something a cult. How did that experience influence her? Did she feel, she felt like she was trapped. She felt like she could not live her life. She felt like she couldn't breathe. She started having panic attacks.
Mhm.
She started feeling, like she couldn't trust people, like people were listening to
Phone
her
conversations,
conversations. Yeah. And
probably
so,
following her some sort of
yeah, made her
psychotic
very suspicious.
episodes. Yeah.
Yeah, because of the way that they would constantly record her, and they had to go through all this testing. And so religion, again, goes back to the event. It's how did it impact you? What did you go through? Because I could have gone to the same church and didn't have that same experience, even though we're at the same space.
Mhm. And it seems like Mormonism, Scientology, Jehovah's Witnesses, they all have the same kind of control kind of aspects to it. So maybe that's what it is, like when there's a measure of control, or people feel manipulated, or they were lied to. Maybe that has something to do with it as well.
So again, it's emotional abuse, people neglect. If you feel like you can't, experience life. I can't wear earrings. I can't,
Celebrate holidays.
holidays. Yeah, you feel like you've been withheld some type of, nurturing space. You feel emotionally abused, and sometimes physically for some religions. So, and then sometimes there's some feelings of neglect. And so those are the different categories of abuse. You have physical abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. And so when you have those types of abuses, especially in a space where you feel that, if you do this, you're going to go to hell, that could also make you feel like my life is in danger. I'm not safe. So if you do this normal human behavior, then I'm going to, especially with attachment. Like in Jehovah Witness, I had a friend who was like is it defellowshipped?
Disfellowshipped. That's what I was going to touch on
Disfellowship,
next.
yeah.
Yep. The
And
shunning.
so shunned because you made a mistake. You're not worthy. The sense of worthiness, the sense of family and community when you're shunned in that space. And they in their defense, they're thinking, hey, I'm trying to protect the other people, my other parishioners, the other people in my space from, and I want you to understand that this is important, that you need to want this, and that you can still be here, but if you're going to be here, you got to be in alignment with our tenets and belief systems. So that could be very traumatic for people. So yeah, there's so many different types of trauma. And I think it's about naming it, identifying it, recognizing it. And once you do that, then you can address those emotions and the different symptoms that align with those experiences.
At what point would a person recognize? Do they usually recognize they have some trauma and they come to you, or how does that usually work?
Sometimes it's more of some of the other things. They may lose friends, they may, be going through a divorce, or they may have issues at work, and they may not even realize, whoa, this is deeper than just me having issues with conflict. I talk to a lot of my clients who have, been living with trauma, and they don't even realize that they were traumatized. I'll give you an example. Just their everyday interactions is an example of how trauma manifests. When someone walks in a room, they have to look, scan the whole room. They can't have their back to the door. If you go to a restaurant, you can't eat with your back to the front door. You got to know all the exits. You're constantly needing to make sure that your environment is safe. That's just one small example of how trauma manifests itself in your everyday interactions. And so they start noticing, they start having anxiety, panic attacks, so we're looking at the symptoms, the symptomology of the trauma. And then as we address the symptoms, like, okay, let's do some deep breathing, let's put some cold water. As I address the symptoms, then we get to, well, what happened? Assessment is the first thing. And so during those assessments, there's a thing called ACEs. And so that's, adverse childhood experiences. So like, well, what happened here? Did your parents divorce? Did you have, were you bullied? All these different questions are asked. And then we get to formulate, okay, well, this is well, tell me more about that. And so we come up with a trauma narrative where they tell their story. And in telling their story, they're able to identify, oh, wow, I didn't realize that not only because I was molested, my mama died. Now, this is someone who don't even know they have trauma. They just think, hey, I'm just depressed, right? Or I
Right.
just have anxiety. So I do an assessment. Your mom died at birth, birthing you. Okay. You're the only child of your mom's that has a different dad, and you're only one who is a person of color. The mom is a white Puerto Rican. The dad that they thought was the dad on the birth certificate is an Irish white man. So this person rejects you by the age of 1 or 2 when they see that your skin is brown. You go into your foster care, and then someone took you as a baby, like a relative, then they gave you the foster care. Then from that point, you go to a foster parent where you was abused at the foster parent's house. then kicked out once you got pregnant. And then the trauma story, then you're married to someone who's an alcoholic who had food scarcity where you didn't have enough food. That's neglect. And it goes on and on and on. But this
Just
person's like, oh
builds
no, I don't have any trauma. I'm like, there's quite a bit of trauma there.
quite a bit, you know.
Yeah, so let's unpack it. And so I think in therapy, it is sometimes a space for discovery for those situations.
So I have some general questions that I like to ask all my guests. Since it's a different kind of conversation, let me just ask you this. What is the biggest benefit of therapy for people who've been placed in traumatic situations? What's the biggest benefit that you've seen in your practice?
Wow, just feeling like, okay, I'm not alone. Other people have experienced this. This is okay, this is the why, just to understand the why of why I'm behaving this way, or and people like, is something wrong with me? No, it's just something happened to you, and your body is, we all have, I talk about the 4 F's where we have fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. That's your body's natural way of defending itself. I talk about the playing possum, where your body will freeze, and the possum is asleep, but not really sleep. It's trying to protect itself from a predator. And so when your body numbs and you don't want to get out of bed and you don't want to brush your teeth, it's a reason for that. Your body has shut down because it's trying to protect itself. And so what we have to do is, again, get you in that window of tolerance, to give you some activities and some things to help your body to respond in a healthier way, because it's just going into what we call our autonomic nervous system. So that psychoeducation piece is key, because once you understand what's going on, you can be intentional and turn on what we call our thinking brain and our prefrontal cortex. That's our part of our brain that is that executive functioning, where you're able to turn that on and say, okay, let me actually steer this ship and take the wheel, so I can get out of bed, so I can, we have what we call a hyper arousal response too, where you're overly aroused, you're hyper vigilant, you ready to knuck if you buck, you know what I mean? You're ready to fight, or your anxiety is so high that you can't even, you avoid things. And so whether you're on one side of the fence or not, sometimes, a lot of times, people have both characteristics, both hyper and hypoarousal symptoms. And so what I do once they come into therapy is I help them recognize it, and then we work together on how we manage this. When does this happen? What happens? What happens before I feel this way? What times of the day do I feel this way? And so we just kind of take a scientific and a very curious approach to their life experiences on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour level. It's pretty dope.
It has been a really enlightening conversation, Mignon. If someone wants to learn more about your practice, where should they go?
olivetreetherapywellness.com. Again, that's olivetreetherapywellness.com. We have information about the types of therapies that we provide. In addition to that, we have opportunities for you to book, and coming soon, you'll be able to get massages and other functional medicine support here as well. We're in Hiram, Georgia, and we also provide therapy online. So if you're in the state of Georgia, we'll love to serve you.
Very good. Thanks so much for your time, and good luck in all your future ventures, Mignon.
Thank you, Amani.